Welcome to this episode of the Gunman. This is part 10 of the transformation of my XF Falcon into a replica race car. So we'll start off with a quick look at the work that's been done previously. There was a couple of holes up there. The guys that have watched all the rest of the videos will remember those holes from the rust repairs, so they ended up coming up quite nice. We'll just have a quick walk around the rest of the car as well and have a look at where we're up to. So this video is day 3 of work, which was the Monday. The previous videos covered day 1 and day 2, and they're all available to be viewed in a playlist if you have missed them. So this video we're going to be doing some repairs on this tail light here, which cracked when I pulled it out. So what we're doing here is we're actually just getting a bit of coarse sandpaper. 80 or 120 would be fine. From memory it was 120 I used here. And I'm just V'ing it out, but only on the back section, not on the front section. So we're V'ing it out to allow the glue to bond in there. I'm doing that on both sides, on the cracked part and on the tail light itself. And I'm then going to be using a Loctite product and we'll be gluing that back in. We'll also be taking you through how to prepare fiberglass parts for paintwork as well in this video. So I've got that sitting in pretty nice. We can have a look at the front, make sure it's nice and flush. We'll then grab our Loctite and pour that straight over. There's many different products on the market that do a similar thing, but we just use this one at my work, so that's just what I decided to use. You've got ones where you can add powders, so the 480 is the one that I decided to use there. And you've got ones that are powders, and you can add the powder and then the super glue, which are quite good as well. So just make sure you give it a move around so it's going to sink right into those scratches. And then I then gave that a couple of hours to set, and I came back to that at a later in the afternoon. So this is the rear wing or the rear boot spoiler that I decided to put on my car. And being that it's fiberglass, some common problems that you get is pinholes. So I'll be taking you through the best ways not to open the pinholes up. So what they do when they make fiberglass parts, they put them in the mould and then they put a gel coating over the top of that, which fills up most of the pinholes, which is the air bubbles inside from when they're pouring the resins in and the glass. So the 99% of the time you're going to be left over with a couple of pinholes, a few of those small air bubbles still coming through. So the best way not to get more than necessary is to rub them by hand. Never go and sand them with a orbital sander unless they're a big flat section and you're sure that you're not going to go through that gel coat, because as soon as you go through that gel coat you'll start opening up more of those air bubbles. So when we do find a couple of air bubbles, which this part actually turned out that it was quite good. I've seen fiberglass parts that are much worse than this one. So I was actually quite happy. There was just a couple of spots on the back edge that we had to fill up, just on that top lip there. So just going around, sanding it all. I'm using 320 grit because it's going to be primed anyway. I always recommend priming these parts, and plastic prime is not required. Some guys in the trade put plastic primer on it, but it's not plastic, so it doesn't need plastic primer. It's pretty much as simple as that. So now we'll have a quick look at those big pinholes there. So you've got a couple of big ones, and just give it a quick sand over, and then we'll go up and mix up our 2-pack filler, and we'll wipe a small amount in there. I cut out most of some of the footage of the sanding just to stop the vid from getting too long. I included the mixing up of the primer just to try and change it up a bit, try to include different steps on each one of my videos so that we're not covering the same thing in every single video. So I then put some 2-pack filler inside there, just some fine filler, and then giving it just a quick heat gun, and just to start the reaction of the hardener in there. It was a pretty cold day on this day, so when it's real cold it sometimes helps to get a bit of heat in there. So while that's continuing to dry, I'm going to come up and mix up my primer. So 4:1 is the ratio we're mixing it up at. Standox I'm using the Duke Zone hardener just to keep the prices down, because it's quite a lot cheaper. Make sure you give it an extremely good stir up, and always filter your primer because you can get left with some lumps. Come back over, and I'm using 180 from memory here. 180 to 240 would be fine. Don't want to go too coarse again, because you could end up going through, as I mentioned earlier, and that will open up more of those pinholes. So then giving it a good dust off, and now we're putting our first coat on. First coat, you don't want it on too heavy. You just want to this is sort of like a grip coat, so it's just a medium half wet type coat, which we can then straight away go over with our next coat. Because I've got the booth cranked right up, I've got it up to about 30 degrees, maybe a touch above 30 degrees. That's not really going to take long to tack off. It's going to flush off straight away, so I'm then going straight away with my wet coat straight after that. And I'll show you a couple of good little tricks to fill up some more of those pinholes here if you hang around just for a few minutes. So you want your air pressure on the, if you've got a HVLP gun, set at approximately 20 to 25 psi for primer. You don't want it too high. You're just going to end up going through too much paint, and you won't get it on quite as thick as well. You want your primer on nice and thick. So we've ended up that we've actually still got a couple of little pinholes there. So what I'm doing is just using my finger to force that primer inside those little air bubbles. This is a good little trick. It works on filler repairs. You've just got to be extremely careful. I've told some guys about this trick, and they've made an absolute mess out of the panel. So you can only do this on your first coat as well. Don't try putting 3 coats on and then finding a pinhole and then wiping it in, because you just make an absolute mess out of the panel. So just after that first wet coat, so we did our tack coat, then our first wet coat, and then we can do just touch it. And you can see I'm just being very careful. I'm not going too harsh on it. Just forcing that primer inside those scratches. Sometimes it can just be quicker than putting filler in after, and it saves a step. It saves a bit of time. So sometimes you'll need to re-prime twice these fiberglass parts, because it looked fine to me prior to priming, but as you've seen here, there's still going to be pinholes. So, and same thing, if you do have to re-prime, just be extremely careful. Try not to rub through your primer, because you will reopen more pinholes. So I'm pretty happy with how that's come up now. And as I mentioned, it's drying off pretty quickly. I'm just blowing a bit of air over that to help it flush off a bit quicker. Being that I'm using Standox primer, it's a pretty good quality primer. You can push it to the limits, and you can really hammer it on nice and wet, and you won't have too many issues with it turning into pinholes as well, because sometimes your primer can have the same effect. If you put it on too heavy, you can actually get air bubbles, because the paint's going harder, and you're trapping the solvents inside there. So just be careful of that if you're using the cheaper primers. If I was using the cheaper primer, not quite as good a quality, I might have just actually walked away for a couple of minutes and then come back to it. So I ended up finding another little one here. Just give that a quick touch in. And as I said, on this job, it was on this wing, it was mainly just that back edge. The rest of it was actually quite good. So you hang around for another couple of minutes. We've got a quick look at the car when it's all finished off. and at the very end there's a couple of links to a couple of the other videos, episodes 7 and 8. If you missed out on them, check them out. So we then gave that another couple of minutes in between coats. I probably walked out for a good 5 minutes, let it eggshell off. It's always obviously going to depend on the temperature and where you are. So this spray gun I picked up actually off eBay for $45 Australian, and to be honest, it's a $45 spray gun. You get what you pay for. And I just wanted my own primer gun, something that, because working in a panel shop, the apprentices always do the prime ups and they never look after the gun, so sometimes when I go to do a prime up myself, it doesn't work, so I'd had enough of that, so I just decided to buy my own cheapie just so that I know I can go and grab a gun when I need to prime without having to clean it out properly, because I know that I'll clean it out properly myself every time, so it's going to work the next time. So that's just about all you need. All up, that probably got about three coats plus that half a coat at the start. And this is the car when it's finished off. It's actually sitting in the garage at the moment. These are my imitation Bridgestones. I painted the Bridgestone label on there, and it's in the garage at the moment. And we had a distributor issue, and ended up having to pull the engine half apart. I've got a chrome rocker cover that I'll be putting on soon, and it'll be back on the road soon. Come down to Custom Cars and Coffee if you're interested in checking the car out, which is the car show in Perth, which is in Fremantle. It's on once a month on the Sunday morning. Quick look through the door jambs. See, it's got a nice interior on it, taking a bit of attention to detail by touching up all the bolts and stuff like that. Thanks again for watching. This has been another Gunman production. Goodbye.